welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am very happy to be with you once again, bringing you another author, another debut author to be precise. As we get started, I do want to remind you to please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. Really does help the algorithm, gets the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. That support is greatly appreciated. Something else that is greatly appreciated, if you are of a mind to do so, you can go to gsmcpodcast.net. There you can leave a tip or a donation. I always say that, tip or a donation. Same thing, but you can donate to the podcast as well as the network as a whole, and that really does help out everyone here at GSMC. Your support, again, is greatly appreciated, whatever form that support takes. This podcast does not exist without you listening, watching, supporting, following, everything. So if you do want to support, though, in a different way, you can go to gsmcpodcast.net. Thank you so much for all of your support. And how is your week going so far? It is still raining. I think it has rained. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it has rained every day this year, at least a little bit. And yesterday I had a brief window of opportunity, so I decided I was going to walk to the grocery store, and it was misting, so there was a little bit, but not bad, not a big deal. So I decided this is my moment. I am going to walk to the grocery store. I'm going to get some exercise. We just need a few things. And I was coming back, and there was a car in an intersection waiting to pull out into traffic. And so, of course, I don't want to go between the car and the traffic. I went behind the car. As I was coming around the car, there was a big patch of mud, and apparently the traction on my shoes is terrible or possibly non-existent. My foot went whoop, and I just went landed right on my left side. The whole entire left side of my jeans was covered in mud. I did not damage either of the 6-liter bottles of water I was carrying, though. I was very proud of myself because I would have been really upset if I had broken either of those bottles, if they had, they didn't even really get crushed. So sitting today is a bit of a challenge. It doesn't hurt per se, but I get very stiff when I stand up. I'm like, oh yeah, I had a little incident with the mud. The driver of the vehicle was very kind. He stepped out and asked if I was okay and if I needed any help, and I was fine. But I had to roll my eyes because I still had most of the walk home to get through, just covered in mud, carrying 2 large bottles of water with a backpack on my back. But I didn't damage anything, including myself. So I was grateful for that. I really hope your week is going better. That is my hope for you, that there was no mud, there was no or slipping on anything this week, but that is my hope. But let's go ahead and talk about this week's book. As I mentioned at the end of the last episode, I am speaking with debut author Amy Rossi about her novel, The Cover Girl. The description of that book is as follows. Birdie Rhodes was only 13 when legendary modeling agent Harriet Goldman discovered her in a department store and transformed her into one of Harriet's girls. What followed felt like the start of something incredible, a chance for shy Birdie to express herself in front of the camera. But 2 years later, she meets a 31-year-old rock star, and her teenage heart falls hard as he leads her into a new life, despite Harriet's warnings. Then, as abruptly as it began, it's over. Like a lipstick-smeared fever dream. Birdie tries hard to forget that time, starting over in Paris, in the dying embers of the LA punk scene, in Boston at the height of the AIDS crisis. She's not that person anymore. At least that's what she's been telling herself. Decades later, Birdie lives a quiet life. She works modest gigs, takes Pilates, and mostly keeps to herself. Maybe it's not the glamour she once envisioned, but it's peaceful. Comfortable. Then a letter arrives, inviting Birdie to celebrate Harriet's 50-year career. Except Birdie hasn't spoken to her in nearly 30 years, with good reason. Almost famous, almost destroyed, Birdie can only make her own future if she reckons with her past. The fame, the trauma, the opportunities she gave up for a man who brought her into a life she wasn't ready for, just like she's not ready now. But the painful truth waits for nobody. not even Birdie Rhodes. For fans of my dark Vanessa and Taylor Jenkins Reid, this striking debut novel explores the dizzying fallout of being seen and not heard in a high-stakes industry that leaves no silhouette unscathed. And so that, as you hear, is the description of The Cover Girl by Amy Rossi. It is told from Birdie's point of view. Amy talks in the book a little bit about the fact that Birdie never says anything directly. It's from her point of view, but there's nothing as you're reading that is, in quotes as what Birdie is saying. It is all being told as though you're in Birdie's head. And when she said that, I realized, yes, I don't think I realized that fully as I was reading, but it adds to the overall feeling of the book. This is a book about a woman who she's leading this very quiet life. She is used to being seen in a certain way and being seen as she puts it, a body. She's a model. She's just a pair of legs. She is whatever the costume designer puts on her, the makeup artist puts on her. She is that person for that ad. So she's used to being seen in a certain way, but not really being seen. And she's definitely trying to figure things out. She has not confronted a lot of things in her life, a lot of issues in her life. And the fact that we never get her speaking directly, she expresses thoughts and it's being told from her point of view, but she doesn't ever say, and I said this in quotes like that, like you're used to reading. It's a very interesting approach, and it really adds to that kind of quiet subtlety that we get with Birdie. I thought it was a very unique way of doing it, very interesting way of doing it. I don't think I'm describing it well, but for me as a reader, it just added a different level to how I was experiencing Birdie's story and her telling of that story. This is a 13-year-old who, as you heard, starts a relationship with a 31-year-old rock star when she is 15. He becomes her legal guardian and takes her on tour with him. And you're gonna hear more about that in the interview, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but just didn't realize quite how much that sort of thing went on in that world in that decade, the 70s. This book starts and takes place in the 70s. It's dual timeline, so we're getting Birdie's 2018 perspective and then going back to her career in the 70s and then 80s and 90s as she's moving forward. But I'm going to go ahead and let Amy talk about the book. Again, it is called The Cover Girl. The author is Amy Rossi.
Hi, Amy. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am excited to have you here. I'm looking forward to our conversation about The Cover Girl. But before we do that and talk about the book, if you'd take just a moment to share a little bit about yourself, give a brief introduction, that would be great.
Sure. I'm Amy Rossi. I currently live and write in North Carolina by way of Massachusetts. And I'm here with my two giant rescue dogs and my partner. And I got my MFA at LSU, graduated 10 years ago this year. And by day, I work in fundraising. And The Cover Girl is my first novel. And that is the product of many years of hard work and a lot of rejection. It took me about 3.5 years to find an agent. And my first book died on submission after 2 years of leaving no stone unturned and really trying to find the right home for it. My agent was passionate and wonderful. And then we found success with The Cover Girl.
Okay. Yeah. Two giant rescue dogs. So how big are we talking?
We are talking about 80 pounds each. One's a little bit bigger than that. I have a Catahoula leopard and a Lab Shepherd Chow Pit mix.
Something or other. Okay. I have two Chihuahuas. So combined, they might weigh as much as your dog's head.
I think so, yes.
But the big dogs can be so sweet sometimes. And do they want to be lap dogs?
Oh yes. Yeah. I left one of them as a lap dog in the other room right now.
Okay. That's great if you had just a bigger lap.
Yes.
It's your fault for not having a big enough lap.
It's true. They get the whole leg area.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about the cover girl. Can you give an overview of the story?
Sure. The Cover Girl is the story of a model in her 50s who is looking back at her career and life, and she's really having to reckon with the truth about the two people who impacted her life the most, her legendary former agent and the rock star who made himself both her boyfriend and legal guardian when she was a teenager in the 70s. Her name is Birdie Rhodes, and she gets an invitation that kind of prompts this reflection where in order to really face her former agent, she has to think about what really happened and how her career and life unfolded and the rock star's impact on all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we get basically two timelines where starts in 2018, she gets the invitation, then she starts looking back, but it's interspersed with the memories and then for her current timeline. And so what was your initial inspiration for the book?
I started thinking about this a really long time ago as a teenager at the turn of the millennium, growing up on VH1 and all of the kind of nostalgia programming behind the music. I love the 70s, all of that.
Yeah.
And I remember watching an episode of Behind the Music where it was mentioned that the subject of the program had become the legal guardian of his teen girlfriend. And I was kind of a record scratch moment. I was like, wait a minute, why am I just now hearing about this? Why don't we talk about this all the time? And I kind of tucked that away in the back of my mind. And when I was in grad school, I was working on a novel about hair metal groupies. And as I was doing all this research about the groupie era of the 80s, I kept coming across all these stories from the 70s and the baby groupie era and the Star 1973 magazine with all the really 13, 14-year-old models who were hanging out on the Sunset Strip. And I thought back to that episode of Behind the Music and found more stories that were similar of other rock stars and other teen girls. And I needed to turn in a short story for workshop. And I started that's how Birdie Rhodes came to be. Her name was Libby at the time, but I just felt like this was something that we needed to talk about. And I started writing it before the Me Too movement kind of took off in its current like hashtag iteration. And that sort of impacted how I approached the story eventually. But it was just something I felt like, I'm a classic rock fan. I grew up on that music. I still listen to that music, but we haven't really reckoned with the kind of predatory nature of so many of the people involved. And I really wanted to write about that and get that conversation going.
Yeah.
So you just heard Amy say that it's really not talked about that much. And yeah, I mean, I don't think I knew the extent. No, I know I didn't know the extent of how much this was going on. What did she call them? Baby groupies, I think. The word baby was in there, just the age of them. And you see glimpses of it here and there as in movies or maybe in documentaries of the time or not period pieces, but things from that time that you maybe watch. I just never realized or thought about the extent to which it was happening. I was very young in the 70s, so I wouldn't have noticed it at all firsthand. I was born in 75, as I've mentioned, so, not really paying attention to those sorts of things. But even as I was growing up in the 80s, not something that I ever thought about. And then as an adult, starting to realize, wait a minute, this is not quite right. And we're going to go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking more about it. Brooke Shields, actually, hers is a name that's mentioned a lot in the book as someone that Birdie compares herself to. And we're going to be talking a little bit about Brooke Shields in reality and what some of the things that she has said about her experience. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute. I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning. Oh, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything?
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Amy Rossi. This is your second and final reminder as we get into the second segment that if you want to support the podcast, you can do so by going to gsmcpodcast.net. You can leave a donation there. That helps not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. Thank you, thank you, thank you, as always, for all of your support. Greatly appreciated. Before the break, Amy was talking about her inspiration for this story, for the cover girl, and she was talking about the program that she watched that talked that really kind of brought to light the relationships between older men and very young girls in this time, especially in this world of music and modeling, etc. So let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Amy.
I think more conversations are maybe starting to happen. I'm thinking of like Brooke Shields in particular, starting to talk more about her experiences as a model and actor, and just some of the things she says, and she says so casually because obviously they happened to her. She's worked through them, but I've had several moments of my jaw going, wait, what? Where were your parents, guardians, adults? You know?
Absolutely. And watching some of those interviews with her as a teen or child, it's just heartbreaking because even the people who are asking where are your parents are doing so in still a really exploitative manner. You know, some like I remember seeing an interview where somebody's talking about like, well, just look how beautiful you are, but also like, why are you in this movie? And it was just so uncomfortable, and what she endured is like, and come out on the other side okay is really something.
Yeah. I think there's I'm sure many more stories that we don't know about. So I'm glad. I don't know if I'm glad. I hope that it has started to change, but you never quite know what goes on behind the scenes. Can you talk a little bit more about Birdie as the main character? What about her do you think is going to resonate with readers?
I think Birdie really wants to be seen. And when she's discovered, she's 13 years old, and she is the child of parents who didn't think they were going to have children. And she came along very late in their lives, especially for when she was born in the 60s. You know, she came across like, late for a first child in the 60s, and her parents didn't really do a lot to accommodate for having a child. They just sort of continued living their lives. And so she was kind of always in the background of her own house. And when she's discovered, it's this kind of spark of like, oh, I have something to offer the world, and somebody sees me. And Harriet Goldman, her agent, sees her. And there are these moments across her career where she just has these moments with a fashion designer who might see her, or another model. And those could be really healing moments if she's able to like get out of the rock star's clutches. And unfortunately, it takes her a long time to see that. But I think a lot of people do just want to be seen and understood for who they are. And she's somebody who deeply feels misunderstood, who's really not capable of voicing her true opinions because she's afraid of what will happen. She's afraid of being unloved, afraid of being left. And I think you don't have to be a teen model. You don't have to be 5'10" and gorgeous to have those same feelings. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people who will find that rings true to their own experiences. And I do also think that unfortunately many people out there have been maybe not in a legal guardianship situation, but have had relationships where you look back and you're like, wait a minute, that wasn't quite what I thought. And I think that journey and kind of trying to make that peace and go through that reckoning will also resonate with readers.
Yeah. For me, especially young Birdie, when we first meet her, she really wants to be seen, but in many ways she doesn't see herself. You know, she's perfectly okay with she even enjoys that she goes on jobs and they kind of just make her whatever it is that they want, and that for her seems okay or good. And that's one of the things that she struggles with, is that I don't think she sees herself.
Right. She's trying on different people, and then she takes off those personalities, just like she takes off her costumes or the clothing she's modeling at the end of the day. And it's freeing in a way, because there's almost like a healthy detachment, because she has healthy detachments and unhealthy detachments throughout the book. Yeah. And as she just gets to be a body, she does find that freedom, and that unfortunately kind of bleeds into her personal life too. And she doesn't really, it takes her a long time to learn how to be present on a modeling shoot and be more than a body and bring herself into it.
Yeah. Can you maybe briefly compare and contrast Harriet and Birdie's mother, because they both play a kind of a mothering role and also not at all a mothering role. So
it took me a long time to kind of find my empathy with Birdie's mother, because I don't think it's productive to write a character who's all bad. And there's a reason she is the way she is. And I think Birdie's mother had gotten married when she was very young to a man who died in World War II, and that was supposed to be her life. Yeah. And she was a widow at age 19, and she met somebody else, and she kind of came from society and had all these expectations, and none of them panned out. And she didn't want to be a mother, and she thought she had avoided it. And I think there's the expectation of like, okay, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have babies. And when that didn't happen, I think there was a lot of relief for her until it did happen. And I just kind of imagine what it would have been like in that time in 1962, and you have no support system, and you've got this baby, and you're supposed to be overjoyed because this was a long awaited thing, and she wasn't happy. And I think that really is what colors their relationship. It takes her there's not a lot of truth or honesty or emotional connection there, because it wasn't what she wanted, and she didn't know how to handle it. And I do feel bad for her in that way, because it wasn't her choice, and unfortunately Birdie had to bear the consequences. And Harriet, I love Harriet. Harriet was so much fun to write, and Harriet tries and fails. And Harriet was a career woman at a time where it wasn't common to be a career woman. And all she needed to hear from Birdie was like, yes, please help me. She did not want to overstep. She would have done, I think she would have moved heaven and earth for Birdie if Birdie had just given her the signal, but she was so afraid of losing her entirely that she could only make these little half measures rather than actually take the risk and say, no, you're coming to live with me. No, I'm getting you out of this. No, we're done here. You're not staying in Los Angeles. You're coming back to New York. And I do think Birdie would have listened if Harriet had done that, because she was really craving that mothering and that maternal support. But Harriet felt she had to tread so lightly.
Yeah.
And so she probably treaded a little more lightly than she needed to, but she wanted to keep Birdie in her life. And unfortunately, when she does reflect on her role in an interview in the 90s, that does fracture their relationship entirely.
Yeah.
And she manages to lose Birdie.
Yeah. You mentioned that Birdie's character started out, you were writing a short story, and it also mentioned taking time to really figure out the reason for her mother's actions. So for you, does character development involve a lot of pre-planning, or do you like them to evolve as you write, or how does that work for you?
I really like to write my way into it. I didn't set out to write a novel where the main character doesn't speak traditional dialogue, but that sort of emerged. And I was like, oh, she doesn't really talk. I just keep summarizing what she says in response to people. And what is that about? And like, how long can I sustain this? But I wanted to leave room for surprise. I do a lot of thinking in the background when I'm not writing, but I don't do a ton of pre-writing or that kind of thing. I kind of just like to write my way into it and see what emerges. And leave myself open to surprise. I think there are characters that ended up having bigger roles that I didn't plan for, and I might not have been as open to that if I had done a lot of planning. And I do like to, this is going to sound a little silly, but one of my favorite things to do once I get into like a good way through, maybe a first draft or mostly through the first draft, I like to do a natal chart
Okay.
and go into like read the birth chart of my main character and just sort of see like, oh wow, like that kind of matches exactly what I've got here. I think there was even something about legs in the natal chart I did, and my jaw was on the floor because all I had to beat was legs was one of Birdie's refrains.
Yep.
And sometimes that can help me if I'm stuck, like, okay, well, what if I go back to this chart, like what about her next action would go against what's in this chart, or what would corroborate that, and what would be interesting there. But I really, yes, I like to write my way through it and just kind of see what situations she ends up in and how she reacts to them.
Yeah. So you probably have some fun surprises sometimes.
Yeah. I one of the things that sort of emerged was these scenes in the book where they're in a restaurant and Harriet is ordering food. And that was one of my very favorite things to write, is that Harriet ordering food. And that wasn't something that was going to be like a thing about Harriet, but it just emerged as something that was really fun to write. And it was a way to reveal things about her and how she interacts with the world around her. And Birdie's reaction to Harriet ordering also said a little bit about Birdie.
Yeah.
So Amy just said, I'm never quite sure what might emerge as I write. And that feels both very stressful and really intriguing to me. Other authors have said the same thing, that they're never quite sure what a character might do or where the story might go, but things emerge and they might think, oh yes, you know what, that makes sense. Or they might think, why did this character just do that? And then dig more deeply into it and figure out, okay, yes, that makes sense. She talked about how Harriet orders and Birdie's reaction to how Harriet orders, and how that she didn't really plan that when she was doing the character sketches, but that came out and kind of worked its way into the story and into how Harriet's and Birdie's relationship functions, or how they see each other, maybe. We're going to go ahead and take our second break of this episode. When we come back, Amy will talk more about writing dual timelines and how she went about that process so that it was cohesive and both made sense and they both tied into each other. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Amy Rossi. Before the break, Amy was talking about writing and character development and letting characters and plot elements develop or emerge as she writes. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Amy.
It goes back and forth from 2018 to then the past. So did you write it that way, or did you kind of write each timeline separately? How did you not work around, but how did you navigate that?
I had them in two separate documents, my present day timeline and my past timeline, because I think one of the real tricks with a dual timeline novel is making sure that both timelines complement each other, and that one is not just existing in service to the other and backing up everything that is happening in the present has to do more than just like corroborate what you've seen in the past. And so I wanted to do that on its own as its own document, not thinking about anything that was happening. And then there are little threads that kind of emerge and little callbacks that I can bring in. There's a scene where Birdie's at another lunch and she's ordering salad and water. And she just mentions still is fine, no need for sparkling. And then you kind of get why she would never drink sparkling water later in the past timeline.
Mm-hmm.
But I did a lot of that work after the draft was written because I wanted to have it be its own thing. And that was one of the biggest edits that I worked on when we were getting ready for submission, was really connecting the past and the present. And I was out there with highlighters and color-coded tabs, just highlighting every single callback and every single thread that emerged, and just really trying to make sure that they both informed each other without being duplicative or repetitive, and that they both worked in as their own thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fun and also complicated. I think that sounds both really fun and also like I would procrastinate and not do it. That's just me.
That's the fun part for me. Drafting anew is that's the struggle now, because I worked on the same two projects for so many years. When I was faced with a blank page for my next project, that was so hard. But getting in the nitty gritty with editing and laying everything out and getting on your hands and knees on the floor with stacks of paper and post-its, that's where the real magic is for me.
Yeah, love it. Birdie has kind of worked through a lot by the time we meet her, when we first meet her. But what do you think she's still missing or still hasn't confronted when that letter arrives, when that invitation arrives?
I really love that question. Because she does have some things that she didn't have when she was younger when that letter arrives. She's spent some time in the world. She's existed not as a model. She's found her worth outside of modeling. And she has people. Mm-hmm. She has people who care about her. She has two pretty good friends. And that was not something that I expected, honestly. She was a very lonely character when I first started writing. And that would have, I know this isn't like the most fun read in the world, but that would have been a really difficult read without the character Bernice and Bobby, who become her friends. And I think what she's missing is understanding who those people really are to her. She knows they're in her life, but she's still holding them at arm's length. Mm-hmm. And she's still afraid to be her full self with those friends. And when she's able to actually talk to Bernice is when things really shift. And so I think really trusting somebody else with her, trusting herself to tell that story, mm-hmm. because she's convinced that she's just been telling it wrong. When she tells people what happened to her, she makes an allusion to her experience as a teenager. She is met with horror a lot, and she's convinced that it's her fault because she's just told it wrong, and so she just stops talking about it. And when she trusts herself to tell it, and when she trusts that she'll be received by the person she's telling it to, and Bernice is there for her, and she can trust Bernice that Bernice is not going to leave her, she can hear a harsh truth from Bernice. I think that's what she's really missing. Like the pieces are there, but she hasn't let herself put them together. And mm-hmm. when she kind of stops holding the world at arm's length and really lets herself feel something, that's when she can really reckon with it.
Yeah. I would imagine there was a lot of research, especially historical time period, lots of different things. Was there one piece of research that really stood out for you as either really interesting or really fun?
One of my favorite documentaries that I watched was called Versailles 73 American Runway Revolution. And that takes place the year that Birdie is 2 years before Birdie is discovered. But it was such an insight into modeling and fashion design and American fashion. And Birdie doesn't become a fashion model. She's more in the commercial beauty. I think that was the term used on America's Next Top Model. She's more of the kind of the cover girl ad, mm-hmm. or a few steps down from that. But she's not the runway model necessarily, but kind of understanding what modeling looked like in those days, and just honestly learning so much about the models who were part of the Versailles fashion show. That was really the moment where American fashion took center stage. It was a fundraiser for Versailles, and several young American designers were basically competing in a fashion show against established French design houses. Mm. And it was kind of like a publicity stunt, but nobody expected the Americans to win, and they did. And designers like Stephen Burrows and Oscar de la Renta and models like Pat Cleveland, who, like, if you can just go on YouTube and find a video of Pat Cleveland walking, is incredible. Like, just what she did on the runway is incredible. Beth Ann Hardison, Marissa Berenson, all these really powerhouse models. They just and most of them, or about half of them, I believe, were models of color, and they just stole the show. And just, there's very little footage that survived from this show. But even just hearing people talk about it in this documentary, I was tearing up. And there's, talking about programs flying in the air. Grace Kelly is in attendance, and she's throwing her program, and people are coming to their feet and stomping. And just, it was just this idea of like what fashion can be, and how fashion can, impact society, and how somebody could really find themselves in this world, and how fulfilling it could be. And that just was one of the most fun parts of my research.
Yeah. Did you ever want to be a model when you were a teenager?
I did. I do not have the body of a model at all, but when I was about 10 years old, I convinced my mother to let me take modeling classes at the local John Robert Powers School of Modeling. And it was me and a bunch of girls around my age, and we'd go on Saturdays, and we'd learn how to get in and out of a car elegantly, and how to walk up and down the stairs elegantly, and that we should be drinking Diet Coke on our breaks and not regular Coke. And I did learn how to do a runway walk, and we had a little fashion show at the end. I had several different looks. I still have some old photos from that fashion show. There was inexplicably an international section where I'm wearing this like ridiculous beret, and I think I'm being Miss France. And we had a nightwear like a little jammy section, but I will bust out my feet in the Y position at a party every now and then and show my runway walk. I really did want to be, I wanted to be seen as a child. And I kind of felt like, I did not grow up in a household anything like Birdie's. I had wonderful supporting parents, but I still felt like I just wanted to be seen. And I kind of just wanted to perform on something. And that did not work out for me. I was not a teen model, but I did draw on some of that experience for Birdie.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I wanted to be a model. As I was reading, I was trying to think, did I ever yes, no, did I think I could? No, like that was, I'm 5'4" on a good day. So there's that, but I think maybe I wanted the glamour of it, but, or, the having someone do my hair and makeup aspect of it. But, I also think that most young girls who do want to be a model have absolutely no clue, like most things, what it really entails.
It looks so much more glamorous than it is, because when you're looking at the swimsuit shoot, it's very cold when they're taking those pictures.
Exactly. And you've got sand in weird places. I'm sure. I imagine.
Yes.
Okay, yes. I did just say sand in weird places. I love the beach. I don't like sand. It gets in weird places. And yeah, so that's my go-to comment whenever anybody talks about sand, is that it gets in weird places and I don't like it. And by weird places, I mean like between my toes or in my hair, or I'm just talking about sand in general everywhere, but also in places you might also be thinking about. I just said also twice. We're going to take I could not be a model. Let's just put it that way. And I couldn't, there are many, many reasons that I couldn't be a model. I'm too short. I don't have the look. I would never, ever make the right face. I make the weirdest faces, as I'm sure you've seen, as I've talked through numerous video episodes that you may or may not have seen. I could never be a model. We're going to take our next break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking about what Amy is currently working on. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Amy Rossi. Before the break, we were talking about the glamorous life of a model and Birdie's experience with that supposed glamour, or what that actually looks like. And I don't know, I've been trying to remember what I thought about being a model when I was 13, 15, 18, and I don't know what I thought. I don't know if I thought that much about it. I probably just assumed it was glamorous. I mean, I saw supermodels on TV. Supermodels became a thing in my lifetime, and I'm sure I wanted to be beautiful like them, but I'm not sure I ever thought about what went into being a model. I probably just thought, oh, they put on makeup and somebody takes pictures and that's it. But I don't know. Let's go ahead and return to the conversation with Amy.
This question always feels funny to me, because like we're talking about this book and then I say, hey, what are you working on now? As though like, come on, what's next? But what are you working on now?
I am working on a second novel that is current. I'm waiting on edits at the moment. It is with my editor, and it's kind of in the same sort of cinematic universe as The Cover Girl. And it touches on maybe some similar themes about women on the sidelines of famous men's stories, and the girls we were and the women we become, and the impact of nostalgia on our modern era, and what gets remembered, and who chooses what gets remembered. It's a lighter hearted book, and I'm pretty excited to have more to share soon.
Yeah. What do you think draws you to writing in more of a literary genre, a literary fiction genre, even women's fiction?
I think a lot about the question, why do you write? And I think it's just always been to make sense of the world around me. And I think that's what literary fiction and women's fiction does. It really allows you to plumb into the depths of untold stories and figure out a way to make sense of the world, and almost like pattern recognition. The things that were, the wheels that were set in motion for Birdie in the 70s to be taken advantage of, we still see those today. And I think by revisiting, like kind of looking at that recent historical lens, I think by revisiting the past, hopefully we can start to make sense of it in the present and avoid repeating some of those same mistakes. But there's no greater feeling to me than when I'm reading a book and I come across a sentence that just make everything make sense.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually revisiting some quotes this morning from Carrie Fisher's Postcards from the Edge, which is a fantastic book.
Yeah.
And I found that book exactly when I needed it. And it was just a mirror and a balm and a friend and just all the different things a book can be. And it's an amazing feeling, and I want to be that for somebody.
Yeah. Okay. So did you always want to write, or did you kind of come into that decision later in life, or what did that look like for you?
I wrote my first book when I was in kindergarten.
Nice.
It was called The Lost Mitten.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about a little girl who loses her mitten in a snowstorm, and then she eventually finds it, and there's a kitten inside. So you can sort of see the rhyming.
Yeah.
And my parents were like, oh, this is, very, very good. And my kindergarten teacher was very impressed. And somebody, I can't remember if it was my teacher or my parents, had it sort of bound with contact paper, and I illustrated it, and I was just so proud of it. And it was a very fulfilling little experience, and that just sort of inspired me to continue writing. And what I would do when I was a kid is I would read a book and I would love that book, and I didn't know the concept of fan fiction, but I almost would end up writing fan fiction, like, but I wanted it to end differently, so I would just start writing different endings, or I want to stay with this character, so I would continue their journey. And I wrote all through high school. I did try to publish a novel when I was in high school. I got like the old writer's market hard copy, like sent off typewritten query letters to agents and all of that. It did not work out. I think that is absolutely for the best. And when I was in college, I wanted to be a creative writing minor. That was what we offered. And you had to apply to the advanced fiction program, go through a few courses and apply. And I did not get in. And that was sort of, that it wasn't my first rejection by any means, but it was just such a, like, oh, it just kind of took the wind out of my sails and felt bad about my writing. And I graduated, and you are on your own for the first time in your early 20s, and you're working your desk job and you don't have homework. And I just sort of fell away from it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And what brought me back was I was in a meeting with my supervisor at the time, and we were kind of talking about, he was telling me I wasn't getting promoted, and I was frustrated with that.
Sure.
And he understood my frustration, but he had been a musician for many years before he was in the fundraising world. And he asked me, Rossi, what do you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to be a writer. And he just looked at me, he's like, well, if you want to be a writer, then write. And I immediately was just like, well, you don't understand, like, and he was like, no, like, because I was like, I used to be really good at it and now I'm not, and I don't know. And he just kind of looked at me and was like, you probably weren't as good as you thought you were, and you're probably not as bad as you think you are now. So just do it. And that was, having somebody speak that frankly to me was really just a moment of reckoning. And that's how I came back to it. And I started taking workshops through the university I was working for, and started looking at MFA programs, and ended up leaving my job and moving to Louisiana to pursue an MFA. And that was, I think 2011 was when we had that conversation, and here we are in 2026. So it really stuck with me.
It reminded me of that conversation. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, but in Sister Act 2, when Whoopi Goldberg is saying, if you want to do that, do that.
Maybe that's what he was drawing on.
maybe. Whatever, it worked. Do you have a piece of advice that you would give to someone who is contemplating writing?
I have two pieces. I would say, and this first piece of advice might sound a little counterintuitive, but there is so much information out there now. And I think for a long time, publishing was sort of like shrouded in secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
More people are being a lot more transparent about their journeys. And I think that is great, but also be careful who you take advice from, because a lot of people can call themselves a lot of things, but that doesn't mean they're speaking from a place of deep industry knowledge.
Yeah.
And so be careful who you're taking advice from. And also, if that person is on a different journey, then they might not have good advice for you. If somebody has become wildly successful publishing their own stories through self-publishing, they might, and you're looking for a traditional publishing path, there might not be a one-to-one there. So, and it can be really dispiriting if you think you're behind and that kind of thing. So be careful who you're taking advice from, and make sure that that advice is applicable to your journey, because it can get you down. And also be aware that the goalposts are always going to move. You might think everything is going to be perfect if you could just finish this story, or if you just could find an agent, or if you could just get a book deal. And I remember seeing that advice, like, the book deal is not going to solve everything. And me thinking, well, I actually know the problem in my life is that I want to publish a book, and I have just been met with no. So the book deal is going to solve everything. And it didn't, because the goalposts keep moving. So just be aware of that and celebrate the win.
Right.
Yes, there's a reason there's a few pieces of advice that keep circulating. It's because they're true. And so if you read something a few times, like several times in the writing and publishing world, you're always going to get rejected. The goalposts are always going to keep moving. And it really is about the work and your love for it, because at the end of the day, that's what you can control.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So when you take the time to read, what do you, genres and authors, what do you like?
I have been reading a lot of debut fiction this past year, and nonfiction. I was part of a online group of debut writers, so that was really exciting to see everybody's books come in, and I cannot wait to read more books from Rachel Phan or Kristen L. Berry. Rachel wrote a memoir called Restaurant Kid. Kristen L. Berry is the writer of We Don't Talk About Carol, and Aaron John Curtis, who wrote Old School Indian. I'm always, if Megan Giddings publishes a book, I'm going to be there first in line. I accidentally pre-ordered 2 copies of Meet Me at the Crossroads because I was just so excited. Um, Mikey Wang is one of my favorite writers. Jamie Attenberg, Taylor Jenkins Reid. I really enjoy recent historical fiction. I really do love a good thriller or mystery. I don't think that's anything I could write, but I really enjoy reading. God of the Woods was so good. Uh, Tasha Coriel writes these like very funny but very deeply felt and well written thrillers. I can't wait to read Matchmaking for Psychopath. I just really like to read outside of myself because I think again that's like such a wonderful way to experience the world. And maybe it's not necessarily anything that I have experienced myself, but that means somebody else is out there finding themselves in a book, which is wonderful. So I just really try to read widely from people from different backgrounds and points of view. And I listen to a lot of audiobooks these days. I did not think I was ever going to become an audiobook person, but I think that's a really great way to experience a lot of nonfiction. So I've been listening to more histories or kind of like memoirs that are infused with history. I recently read Undocumented Americans, and I read a lot of Native American history through audiobooks last year.
Yeah.
I, maybe similar to Amy, a long time ago, didn't really listen to audiobooks. I had trouble concentrating on audiobooks. I would get distracted about them, but I now love audiobooks, and I listen to a lot of audiobooks because I can do it when I'm doing other things, when I'm walking, when I'm driving, when I'm lots of other things. And I love how listening to an audiobook can really change the way you hear it or you take in information. Sometimes it's hard to decide, did I love this because I loved the content, or did I love the author? I mean, did I love the narrator? And vice versa. Did I not like this because I really didn't like the way the person was reading it? But I do love how I take in information sometimes differently than when I'm reading it. And so I've really come to appreciate audiobooks. But let's go ahead and take our final break of this episode. When we come back, nothing bad happens to the dog, and of course other topics, but I'm just going to leave you with that. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Amy Rossi. Before the break, Amy was talking about some of her recent reads and listens when it comes to audiobooks. Let's go ahead and return to the conclusion of this conversation with Amy.
I've had a lot of thrillers on the podcast especially the last couple of years, and it's almost like muscle memory, except in my brain, I can't quite relax. Even when I read a book that I know is not a thriller, I've read so many lately. I'm waiting for something that's going to jump out and terrify me.
I recently read an arc of a book that I provided a blurb for, and I was so grateful that there was the author's note in the front that said nothing bad happens to the dog.
Yes. Where did I saw something similar to that. I think it was on the back of a book that actually they posted nothing bad happens to the dog. And there might even be a website too. If there's not, somebody should get on that.
When you're in that thriller mode, you never know.
Exactly. Leave the dog alone. Is there anything that we haven't? Oh wait, let me back up. Sorry. If people want to know more about you and the book and the upcoming book, website if you have one, and any social media that you're active on.
Yes, my website is amyrossi.com, and you can subscribe to my very deeply sporadic newsletter on there. You will not get weekly updates or anything like that. So you can also find me on Instagram at Amy Rossi Writer, and you can find me on Blue Sky at Mossy Air.
Okay, thank you. And now, is there anything that we haven't covered that you really wanted to make sure you highlighted or brought up during our time together?
Yes, I would love to talk a little bit about Birdie's experiences in the late 80s and 90s and my personal connection to that. When Birdie leaves the modeling world, she ends up becoming really involved in the world of AIDS activism after she loses somebody she deeply cares about to complications from AIDS and HIV. And I was wanting to tell the story of a woman's life through these time periods and how the time periods she was in were influencing her as well as, the people around her. And so you can't write about a model in the 80s and early 90s without touching on the AIDS crisis because it did impact the fashion world so deeply. And that was also a way for me to honor somebody who was very important to me. And there's actually a character in the cover girl named Bobby. And one of Bobby's things is that he is a devoted uncle. And I had my own uncle Bobby. His name is Bobby. And he was such a wonderful support in my life. I was in theater all through high school, and he would drive from Charlotte to Raleigh and be in the front row at opening night. And he took me to my first concert, which was Culture Club, Human League, and Howard Jones, a reunion tour in 1998.
Okay.
And just a wonderfully supportive uncle. And he passed away in 2000 from AIDS-related causes, complications. And that character was just really a chance for me to honor the impact he had on my life. And we've made such wonderful advances in how HIV is treated. There are medications now that you couldn't have dreamed about. I remember when I was in grad school teaching visual argument and to my students, we watched a clip from a Magic Johnson special, and none of them really understood what the clip was saying because they were growing up in a world where AIDS wasn't a death sentence. And how amazing is that? And I'm just so grateful for how far we've come. And I was grateful to be able to, honor the people who gave so much. One of the documentaries I watched was about the history of ACT UP. And I just, it's not The Great Believers by any stretch of the imagination, which is a wonderful book, but I really wanted to touch on that period of history and honor my uncle. And I hope that if people do want to read more about that or were inspired to read more about that, that they do, because there's a lot of material that goes really in depth on it and the history of ACT UP. That documentary is available for streaming, so I encourage anybody to check that out.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And what a wonderful way to honor your uncle, who just sounds like a wonderful, lovely person.
It really was.
Yeah. So it's always good to know when young people have anyone in their life, even if it's only one person, then that makes a world of difference. So I'm glad that he was able to be that for you. All right, so thank you. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day, out of your weekend to talk to me about the book. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you once again to Amy for joining me to talk about The Cover Girl and her experience writing it and the reasons behind why she wrote it. Thank you to her again for sharing the experience of her uncle and the character of Bobby, who is got a very important role in the book. It's not the biggest role in the book, but it is very important, and it's a very important connection for Birdie's character. But what a beautiful tribute that Amy wrote about her uncle. And I always like stories like that, so I'm really glad that she shared that with us at the end of the conversation. So thank you to Amy. If you are a fan of dual timelines, if you're a fan of the decade of the 70s, this is similar a little bit to the memoir we had a few weeks ago with Diane Christensen, who was talking about her experiences also during the 70s of being a showgirl. Hers was a memoir, of course, but kind of similar vibes. If you are at all interested in that decade, whether as a historic time period or because you lived through it, then this is a book that you want to check out. But if you are a fan of dual timelines, if you're a fan of main characters who are really trying to find themselves, find their sense of identity, etc., and then again, that interesting way that Amy wrote the book from Birdie's perspective, but where Birdie never directly speaks. You should definitely check this out because it's a very interesting way to portray your main character and to give us a different insight into her life and kind of just how she sees herself, sees the world, etc. So thank you again to Amy for joining me for this. Thank you, as always, to you for joining me for this episode. I hope that you will be joining me next time. We are moving into a biography. We will be talking about Louise Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun. My French accent is terrible. I can say it in my head, but it doesn't come out of my mouth very well. But I will be speaking with author Judith Lissauer Cromwell about this woman. You can see it says Portrait of an Artist. She was Marie Antoinette's favorite portraitist. Portraitist is hard to say. I'm going to have to practice saying that word as well. I need to practice my French and saying the word portraitist. But she started as a teenager painting portraits in 18th century France, and that was a time period there was a lot going on. And so, first, just being a young woman painter in Paris at the time was complicated enough, but then you throw in the French Revolution and political upheaval and everything. She led a very interesting life. So I'm looking forward to talking to Judith, and I hope that you will join me for that conversation in the next episode. In the meantime, as always, if you are a fan of this podcast, please like, follow, and subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to or watching this episode on. That really does help the podcast. It gets it out to more readers such as yourselves. Another thing that really helps is to leave a positive review. Does not have to be complicated, but a positive review is extremely helpful to the algorithm, getting the podcast out to more people. You can follow the podcast on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Love hearing from you. Come find the podcast, ask me questions, let me know what you're reading, all of those good things. What are you reading now that it's February? Do you read because it's winter? Do you read something romantic because it's February and Valentine's Day is on Friday? Let me know what you're reading and what your plans for reading in the next few months are. You know me, I'm nosy. I love hearing about it. But come find the podcast and follow on social media. In the meantime, I hope you're having a great week. Hope everything is going well. If you have plans for Valentine's Day, wonderful. I hope they're great. I hope you have a wonderful day. If you don't have plans, stay home and eat chocolate. That was always my plan for Valentine's Day. Whether I was single or in a relationship, eating chocolate is always the top of my list for Valentine's Day. So whatever makes you happy, I hope that you will be doing that on Saturday. But I hope you're having a good week, whatever is going on in your life right now. You know, my final wish for you is the same as it always is, and that's that I hope you have plenty of time to get lost in a good book. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you next time.